Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of the SMEEA podcast. My name is Jose Rodriguez, your third vice president. Today, we are going to be joined by Grant Schuster, the former union president of Anaheim Secondary Teachers Association and currently the CTA NEA coordinating director on the CTA board. And for our purposes, Grant was instrumental in getting community schools established in Anaheim, making it a model for school districts across the state for how to implement the program. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience, so we are so grateful that he made time for us today to share some of his insights for us as we begin to implement community schools here in SMBSD. But before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. You can find these interviews on our YouTube channel, where we hope you'll like and subscribe. But the audio versions of these interviews are available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just look for the SMEEA podcast. We hope that you will find these interviews informative and enjoyable. All right, on that note, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, Grant Schuster, for joining us today. This is our second podcast episode for the SMEEA podcast. Grant, can you just take a minute and maybe introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about your educational background, your union background, and what you do now through CTA.
Yeah, sure. My name's Grant Schuster. I'm in a unique position on the CTA board. It's called the CTA NEA Coordinating Director. So I'm one person that sits on both the NEA board nationally and the CTA board statewide and kind of coordinate access to all the different programs. Previous to that, I was the president of the Anaheim Secondary Teachers Association for 6 years. And coming out of our distance learning model during COVID, we really focused a ton of our attention on the collective decision-making process between teachers and students and parents and district, and saw community schools as a model that could institutionalize, create structures that would enable us to succeed in taking that vision directly to our school sites. Before that, I was a middle school social studies teacher for 22 years, Dale Junior High in Anaheim. Grew up in Orange County, went to San Diego State University, and this is my 29th year in education. But really, the last 6 years have been dedicated to really developing this community school model and helping districts and their communities really transform the process of implementing whatever is being implemented in their communities through the public school system.
That's awesome. I'm also a social studies teacher, 8th grade. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I love that. So we're in the process, we mentioned this earlier when we were discussing our district, our union. We're in the early stages here of community schools. And I'm just wondering, as we are embarking on this journey, we're at the outset, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you and your district work together to bring this program to Anaheim.
Yeah, and I always like to tell the story of the beginning, because people see us now and go, oh my gosh, if our students and parents and teachers and district, everyone worked together that way. But how do we get to that? And what was interesting is in our district, it didn't start that way at all. Right before the pandemic started, my district went ahead and just wrote a grant for 2 community schools, grabbed it, implemented it, didn't involve anybody else outside the district administration. And as we were coming out of the pandemic, really all that our community schools, and all this is very important, but it limits the vision and scope of a community school, that they were just focused on wraparound services, which again are incredibly important, but it's only one pillar of the community school platform. And really, you're selling yourself short if you don't understand the power and what we can do on a global level in a school district with this community school model. And so what happened as local president, in fact, I went to NEA to get a grant around building a steering committee for community schools. And I was looking at this, from our union perspective. And how could I build a coalition to kind of combat the district? And here the district was creating a community school on their own to do whatever they thought was the best. And really, both of us were going about it the wrong way. I ended up finally going to a school board meeting and said, look, we got this grant from the NEA. We want to bring together students, parents, teachers, community partners, and the district to start co-creating, to start collectively looking at issues we face and co-creating solutions and how we're going to address needs outside of the classroom, outside of school, but also inside of the classroom. And that was our first step. And we built that steering committee. It took about a year to get it rolling. And then we actually applied. We had the 2 community schools that were being funded already, but then the CCSPP came along, the grant, and we ended up applying for 13 sites the first year and got awarded all 13 of them. We've since expanded to 15 of our 20 campuses. We're only a junior high and senior high district. And over that, almost a little over a 3-year period now, it's been really an incredible transformation on how really there's 4 steps is for these partner groups to come together and create some sort of needs and asset assessment and implement that needs and asset assessment together, and then analyze the data together, and then come up with ways that any gaps can be addressed in the schools, in the communities together, and then review and kind of reflect on what has worked and what hasn't, doing all of that together. And really, that's the power of community schools, because really, we all have our own power within our silos. But what it's hard to understand, especially sometimes from a district perspective, because they have the authority within the structure as it exists today. But we expand so greatly our capacity to do things when we bring everyone in together. In fact, our capacity is greater than if you just add up those 5 silos of parents, students, community partners, educators, and the district. That the capacity grows exponentially, and we have found we can get so much more done. And public schools really should be the center of democracy in any community, and bringing all those folks together. It's just incredible what we can get done.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you used the word democracy there, and I'll revisit that in a minute because I think that's a powerful way to look at community schools. I do want to you mentioned wraparound services.
Mm-hmm.
In our district, I think some of the hesitation is that this is a top-down program. Yet again, another program the district is rolling out top-down. And I think some people may be thinking, don't we already provide wraparound services? Do we really need to do this? Is this something the district is forcing us to do? So maybe you can talk more about the difference between wraparound services and what community schools offers.
Well, so that is one pillar, but even at that point, here my question always is, how did the district know that wraparound service was needed, and who decided? And oftentimes there are stories that I have listened to from communities where districts, and even working with teachers, oh my gosh, we really these kids, we need a dental clinic on our campus. And then they open a dental clinic and nobody comes because nobody went out to the community, to the students, the parents, the community partners. No one realized that the county already had a robust program where lots of people were going and they didn't need an extra service like that. But even though it was altruistic, it was from the top down. And we need to make sure that everything that is on our campuses, it has been discussed and analyzed and researched collectively by the group, and collectively decided upon that was the direction that everybody wanted to go. Now, that is just wraparound services. There are other things that are really important. One, I've kind of been talking about it in general, this collective decision-making process, this collective governance and leadership structure. Our community school steering committee early on made a recommendation to the school board that the $30 million that was the grant, the original grant it's about $30 million in our district, that it would be the purview of the community school district steering committee to make recommendations directly to the school board. That this was their purview, they were going to do this together, and it has really shown it's had a powerful impact when parents and students see that their voice and their part in the decision-making process is acknowledged and valued, and it gives them agency. And the numbers of people that we have on our campuses now, we have measurements with our process for needs and asset assessment. We don't have any schools that are below at least a 75% participation rate of parents in being part of this process. Most sites have 100% of staff and students. And then we have our community partners as well. And getting all of that data and then using it to help us make our informed decisions is what's been really impactful. And then one other thing that often gets ignored is the pillar about the impact on the classroom. Oftentimes schools look at it as after-school programs, but really the most impact that we can have is in the classroom itself. And how do you take all of the information you get from needs and asset assessments? For us, that includes surveys and smaller community voice circles and one-to-one interviews that our teacher leads and our community school coordinators they coordinate and carry out during the school year. And we take that information and use it to impact instruction. And I'll give you an example. We had a high school where students, teachers, that there was this realization in social studies and in science classes, English classes, where student work was really reflecting this idea of living in a food desert. And understanding there was one of these classes where a student research had discovered that federally, in this part of Anaheim where Magnolia High School is, it is classified as a food desert. And so the students and teachers at that site got together to talk about this, and students talked with their parents. What could they do? How could they positively impact this? And a decision was made, actually. They looked around the campus and found an area behind some science buildings that was a little over 2 acres in size, a big L shape. And they went to the district with a proposal to build an urban farm. And our community partners, they hear about this. And going to the community partners, one of the nonprofits actually went ahead and donated money to build the urban farm. And now this has directly impacted instruction. Science classes use the farm to go out and talk about soil science and food sustainability in an urban setting. You have the social studies classes looking at policy and laws about this. You have English classes that go out into the farm and walk around and use it for inspiration. And that was just that school site. Every single school site comes up with something else because collectively their community may see something else that they want to have envisioned within their school's master plan. So it's just really powerful to see how you can use what is going on in the community to make curriculum more community and culturally relevant to the students and their families.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up those other pillars. That's another thing that gets forgotten as well, like you mentioned, the dynamic that has to occur in the classroom to be more culturally relevant to them. So thank you for, I was going to ask you that, but you beat me to the punch. The other question I want to follow up on is, you mentioned earlier that there's a democratic component to community schools. And so maybe you could explain more about the structures, the steering committees, all the people who are participants in those committees. I was able to go and observe in Anaheim a couple of years ago. It blew me away, the number of people around that steering committee table. It was amazing.
Yeah. So our steering committee started out. Now, look, it's hard to start out completely democratically when you don't have the structures in place yet. So originally, I sat down with the district administrator who was overseeing community school implementation, and we looked at what a steering committee should look like. But one, we want to have equal representation. So you have the five groups. You have the educators, which your teachers union, but ESPs, your folks on campus. You have your educators. You have your district. You have students. You have parents, and you have community partners. And we decided from the start that we would have a group of 15. There would be three of each of those. And for community partners, I came forward and said, look, as we start this, and I'll explain how it's changed over the years. But to start, we really should be looking at one racial and social justice group, and we have one in our community called Los Amigos, who's been around for 50 years now and has a relationship with many of the families in our community. We looked at Okapica, which was a group that focused on providing medical access to BIPOC communities. So that was important to us. And then the other was a multi-denominational religious service organization. And for us, that was Oko, Orange County. Oh gosh, there's three C's. Orange County Community Church Organization. I'm losing the acronym, but anyway, we have those groups came in originally, and three students, three parents, three district, three from the educators, and then we started to work and started to collectively make decisions. And one of the first decisions we made was, with this funding, what were the positions? Now, the grant demands having a community school coordinator, but we thought that more was needed there, that a coordinator really and can get bogged down, their time can get taken up with all of the community partners and wraparound services and everything. But we also wanted to stress the importance of the classroom. So what we decided as a steering committee and made a recommendation to the district and the board, which they accepted, was to have a full-time community school coordinator that would be a class 5 position, but then a certificated position half-time on each campus, where you had a teacher who was still half-time in the classroom, but then half-time outside of the classroom working with the community school coordinator, gathering all of this data, mapping out all of their assets they have on the site and in the community, what the needs were, helping us discover the gaps. And then that teacher lead worked with the staff to develop the culturally and culturally and community relevant curriculum. And so that was a recommendation, and that was part of the grant. As the years went on and as we started going through this decision-making process, we actually expanded the team to its current size, where I think they've decided that this is as big as they want to go, but it's up to 25 now, with 5 people representing each group. And especially the community partner, we added the city of Anaheim. And it's important, we asked the city. We didn't want the mayor. We didn't want a city council. We wanted like the manager of the city works, who understood all the programs in the city and how we could make those accessible on school campuses. And the other was a nonprofit. We wanted to have a nonprofit that could help us navigate the nonprofit world. But this was a decision made collectively by the team. When we started out, we actually had a process called Fist to 5. A lot of nonprofits use it, and it's kind of like, 1, no way can I go forward. 2, I have real problems with this. 3, it's like I need questions answered before I can do it. 4 is I'm okay with it. And 5 is, yes, I will promote this. I want to do this. And with the 15 people at the beginning sitting around the table, we never moved forward with anything unless all 15 people had a 4 or 5 in their Fist to 5 process. And we stopped meetings and answered questions and waited until everyone was comfortable in moving forward together. And if, one person or 2 people said, we're really not comfortable, then we tabled it and waited to do more research and waited till the next time. And one other really important decision that group made the first year was that, other than hiring people to start doing jobs, so once we hire people to do jobs, that's kind of the infrastructure. But then any programmatic money, the money that was left that would be used, we said we're not spending anything the first year. We're not spending any money until we can actually do all of our needs and asset assessments and collectively decide how to move forward and what programs or interventions would be best on those campuses. And that's very different for public education. I mean, we all know it's hey, you better spend that money by the end of the year, or we're going to sweep that account out, and you're not going to have anything left. And it took building some trust with school sites to say, believe us, it's not going anywhere. That money's in your account, but we have to wait. We want to wait until we actually have the data and go through this process where we collectively decide how to spend it. And we did that. The steering committee also decided what percentage of the discretionary money would be under the scope of the district-wide steering committee that would be for district-wide programs, and what percentage would go to each site based on the number of unduplicated pupil count numbers they had on each of those campuses. So the important thing is that all of these decisions were made collectively by the steering committee. It could be different in any other district on what they decide. What's important is the system is in place, that they're deciding it together and what direction they want to go. Oh, and real quick, it also goes down to the school sites then. The school sites have teams. Their teams are a little smaller. They are teams of 15, where they have the students, parents, community partners, site admin, and they make decisions specifically based on the needs and assets of their school. And they have a smaller budget, but that's to specifically work with things on their campuses that they feel need to be addressed. But now, after 3 years, we're also very much encouraging the braiding of funding to provide access to LCFF funding, also to Title I funding, which most of our campuses have. So it's not just about that funding that comes along with the grant, but once these systems are in place and you have these collective groups that represent everyone in the community, why not use them to help guide where all of the resources, at school sites and district-wide are going?
That's super helpful. I love the explanation of that structure. It's almost like you're like a federal system. Like you've got the steering committee overall at the district level, and every site kind of has their own committees as well, steering committees. And then you have the school district's coordinator, and then a halftime lead at every site.
Well, we have from the grant, we have a full-time community school coordinator and a halftime teacher lead. But before the grant even existed, we had a family and community engagement specialist, a classified position at each school site. And those still exist, and they work together. Those three people are all on the site teams. It's important too, like the site team, the principal is not the chair of those site team committee meetings. The coordinator and the teacher lead are co-chairs and work with all those other folks. And one thing I failed to mention is after we originally selected the steering committee, now each one of those partner groups, they select their own members. The students have a process district-wide where they go out and open these positions, and they have an interview process, a panel of students who choose who they want to be their representatives on the steering committees and on the site teams. And the same with the parents. The community partners choose who they want. The educators, we choose who we want, and the district chooses who they want. It's really important that folks have that agency to select who they want to be their voice on that committee.
Yeah, and to that last point, when I went and observed the steering committee at I think it was the ASTA offices, wow, I was just blown away by those student representatives, and yeah, just how well spoken they were and how they represented their peers.
And it can be a little frustrating. I went to a conference, and I won't mention specifically the name or the area, but we had 3 of our students speak, and these were just students we picked from different schools. They weren't, the students that were getting, the full ride to Harvard somewhere. Students that we picked, from their social advocacy community advocacy they had on campus. They went and spoke, and afterwards we were pulled aside from an administrator from a district back east. And the administrator said, man, I hear what your students are saying, and I just wish that we had, students like this that were so motivated in our schools. And I just kind of shook my head. I'm like, you do. They're all there. We have to create the system that makes them comfortable, that allows them that freedom, that builds up that agency, that they feel comfortable stepping out and advocating for themselves and their communities. These students that wanted to address living in a food desert and food sustainability in an urban setting. Now that farm, it not only provides food for their school kitchen, they also have an entrepreneurial program in the business department, and they sell some of those vegetables out in the community. They have boxes that they create that get delivered to people's homes, and they also have food that goes out to community food banks. And these are decisions that are made at the campus level on how it's not just about learning about what those issues are in our community. How are we going to impact the ease of those burdens on our community? Because we have the power to do that. We're going to make our schools better, but we're also going to make our communities a place where families can thrive.
I yeah, absolutely love that, because our students are the future leaders of our communities. And they have a lot of great ideas. We just need to allow them the opportunity to speak. Yeah. Grant, I've taken so much of your time, Grant. I took more time than
That's okay.
than I promised. Before we leave, though, if I could ask one last thing,
Mhm.
what advice would you give our district? Would you give us as we try to start this implementation process?
Well, we started this with a motto with our steering committee that progress travels at the speed of trust. And you have to start, you start small. And what was really great for us in the beginning, when we got together the very first time as a steering committee, what we did was collectively we wrote a school board resolution around what the grant language was and said, this is what we are all about, this is what we want to do, and we want the school board to vote and support this view of what we see for the future of our district. And the school board did unanimously. We actually wrote it a little differently and took it to the city of Anaheim and presented at a city council meeting. And the city of Anaheim, which is not widely renowned for progressive ideals, supported it unanimously within their community. And then when it came time to determine what these positions were for the school community school coordinator and the teacher lead, we wrote those job descriptions together. And we had people from the community and the Teachers Association, a variety of people on the interview panels to select those. So by setting up those steps in the process where we were collectively building these structures, it built the trust that then we could move forward, because trust isn't linear. There were moments in meetings where the district might say, oh, we're not going forward with this. Or the teachers union says this is totally against our policies, or a community partner says the same. But if you're building that trust, you can find your way through those things. If you have no trust, you're not going to get anywhere. And there'll be ebbs and flows to the trust, but by continually building those institutional structures and implementing them together, you build that trust that's going to allow you to grow this. And then it's funny, our other saying was we're going to continue to go slow to go fast. We went very slow in that first year. By year 2, the programs we were implementing, based on all of that data we had and how we decided on things together, we really started moving. And then we started over again when we got 2 new sites, supported by the grant. We had to start slow with them. And then they eventually came into that moving much faster because of the collective power and trust they had built.
I love that. And I like that idea of like going slow to go fast. I think we can definitely take that and implement that as we move forward. Thank you so much, Grant, for your time. I appreciate you. I hope you don't mind if I continue to email you or stay in contact with you and pick your brain as we go forward in this process.
Oh, absolutely. And, happy to come out there for a visit anytime. if you guys want to hear more or have specific questions, that is what we're here for. We've built this, and we're so invested in this being the future of public education, and quite frankly, the future of democracy, from the smallest foundational piece, your neighborhood school.
I love that. All right, Grant. Thank you so much. Have a great day, sir. I'll be in touch.
All
Thank
right,
you.
take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow, that was a great interview. I want to thank Grant Schuster once again for sharing with us just a little bit of his insights, his knowledge and experience, and also for carving out some time for us in his busy schedule. I hope that this was informative. I hope that this will help our members learn a little bit more about what community schools is, kind of the underlying philosophy of community schools, and then how we can learn from community schools that exist already in places like Anaheim as we move forward here in SMBSD. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I hope that you will continue to tune in to the SMEEA podcast to learn more about community schools and other issues affecting education locally at the state level and, of course, nationally. You could do us a huge favor by liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. We appreciate your continued support. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. And remember, the struggle continues. Take care.